The number one reason most tech pros never get into consulting, it's not that they don't have the skills and it's not that they're not ready. It's because they have no idea where to actually find these contracts. They think if they quit their job, they'll end up on the street doing things that they're not proud of. But here's the truth. High value contracts are everywhere. You just need to know where to look. So the first thing I'm going to do is reach out to my warm network. And it's pretty obvious once we get into this why you would do that. But a lot of you might think, I don't have a large network, this was never going to work. And the truth is that you don't need a large network. You just need to be one person, someone, rather than someone for everyone. So you need to find a few people who already like you. And the reason that we want to do this is because it's super low friction to actually do the thing that you want to do, because these people already know who you are, how you've worked, you might have worked with them before, and things like that. So the barrier to entry is far less than if you're emailing a whole bunch of cold strangers. So these people are lurking around in your LinkedIn messages, your old Slack DMs, team chats, WhatsApp, they could be friends, old email threads, past jobs, clients that you've worked for, projects that you've done. They're literally everywhere. And again, it's just people that you have worked with previously. It's nothing special. And again, they could even be your friends, managers who liked you, old bosses, classmates, things like that. What you're going to do for step 2 is you're going to make a small list of them. So I normally call this my tiny list, and it's between 10 to 20 people. And these are going to be the people who not only are most likely to respond to you, but also they're most relevant to whatever it is that you're trying to do. So you're not going to go straight to salespeople first if you're trying to get a job in like AI automation, specifically working for someone else. You would go to someone who's working in the tech space because they're far more likely to A, understand what you're talking about, but B, work closely with people who are using the tech that you would be using every single day. So there's more opportunity for you that way. An example of that would be going to speak to one of your friends who's a DevOps manager if you're trying to sell DevOps people. Pretty straightforward. That's not to say later on, once you've made this tiny list, you move on to people in sales and all the other departments, because again, they still have value that you can use, but you want to start with the most relevant things first. So you've got to keep in mind you're not blasting everyone. There's a reason that we choose these people, because we want to take a strategic approach so that we can make it hyper-personalized, but we also want to make sure that our time is going to a very strategic place so that we get exactly what we want. So what exactly are you going to be looking for? You're going to find people you got along with professionally. Obviously, if you've worked with them before, they respected your work, you have shared delivery history. So that's really great. If you work together on similar projects, then they really know who you are. And they're now at companies with real budgets. So these are the places that you're going to start with first. Obviously, you can start with your friends if they fit any of these relevant criteria. And then step 3 is to reconnect with them. So it's very important that you do this in a specific way, because a lot of people come across as being super salesy when they do this kind of thing. And the last thing that you want to come across as is a salesman, especially to your friends. Now, obviously, if you have some really good friends, you could probably just pitch this totally casually. Obviously, they wouldn't care. But some people who are more like work friends or acquaintance type friends, you don't want to go and then just say, hey, I'm doing this thing now. Can you help me? That's not really going to work in your favor. So what you want to do is you always want to start with them. Make it conversational, and again, be human. This template isn't something you're just going to copy and paste to someone. It's a framework that you would use to reach out to these people. So you say, hey, whatever your name is, how's life going? I saw that you're doing this new thing, whatever it is that they're doing with their life. Again, you need to make sure you have been looking at whatever they're doing. You let the conversation go on for a while, all about them. And then ultimately you say, I quickly wanted to let you know I've started doing something new as well. I'm now helping whatever type of company solve this type of problem using this method. If you know anyone in the space looking for help, let me know. And the reason that you frame it this way is that you're not directly asking them. You're not saying to them, do you need any people? Do you want this? You're asking if they know anyone. So it's not really asking them. It's not putting them in that awkward position as if you're asking them directly. And again, with something like this, you don't want to use this robotic kind of template that I've got here. Humans don't really speak this way. Just use it as a guideline to get you wherever it is that you want to go. So an important note on this, as I just mentioned, is you're not asking them to hire you. You're asking if they know anyone, and this removes all of the awkwardness. And the goal of this is not to try and land every single one of these 10 calls. Obviously, that would be amazing, but the likelihood of that happening is very low, even though these people know you, unless you just found some kind of miracle water that can make people young again. Most of them are probably either going to ignore you, or they'll just have a conversation, and as soon as you say something back to them, they just won't respond again. But the point being is that you only need one yes. And if I had to think of a personal scenario where I've used this, it would be at least 5 stories where I've done this over and over again, because the point of this is it's not like I did this once when I started consulting 12 years ago and never ever did it again. That would be ridiculous. You keep coming back to this, because once you use it once and you land on a project, your goal once you're on that project is to make as many friends as you can, which means you've just opened up all these new webs of people who are going to end up going to new companies and new places and working for new people to spread your name around if you did a good job. So the more you do that, the more you can keep using this warm outreach method, because again, they will go somewhere new and they will want to help you if you've helped them or if they liked you and things like that. So the point being is that you literally just need one person. Everywhere you go, you just need to find that one person. And I've used this at least 5 or 6 times over my career to make tons of money. One of them made me over $1 million. Another one made me like $750,000. Super lucrative to take this approach. Even if it's people who you think, I'm just not going to speak to them, it always helps, whether you're trying to find work or to find people to help you do the work that you actually need to do. So always keep it in mind. Then we get on to point number 2, which is boutique consultancies. And these are one of the best places to find contracts because these people are always looking for work. Now, there are tons of reasons for this, which we'll get into in a bit. But this pretty much built the backbone of my entire consulting income. And it was built originally from warm leads and then expanded to partners and things like that. But a lot of people actually ignore this. They stick to things like job boards, or they entirely ignore their warm network and they try the cold approach and reaching out to all of these people, or they go directly to recruiters and things like that. And obviously all of those methods, they ultimately work. But these things are a lot better to do first. Because if I look at it from the perspective of me being a consultancy owner now, if somebody sends me their profile and they've researched who I am and what I do, and maybe put in a little bit of personality into the email or DM or however it is that they get hold of me, I'm never going to turn someone down who I know is highly skilled and can help me in the future. It's just a no-brainer because there are tons of times where I come across a project and I might not be able to source it for someone. So it's super important to keep that in mind, is that they need you a lot of the time just as much as you might need them, which is why this is so lucrative. So I've worked with a ton of boutique consultancies, specifically in the Splunk world, and they're all Splunk partners, and then they just go and resell me to the end client. But the point being is that it's a super easy way for you not just to make friends and expand your warm network. Again, all of these people in these partner consultancies, they become more valuable outside of Splunk as well because they can sell you in a whole bunch of other different techs that you might know, but then also refer your guys from your own consultancy whenever they might need someone. So you can see how it all cascades down. But the point being is that when they needed delivery firepower, I was there as their plug and play kind of person. Hey, we have a project. Here you go. Come on board. So how it works, you have vendor partnerships. For instance, you would have Splunk, which is a massive corporate, and then they don't have like a professional services team of 20,000 people, but how they operate is they have smaller teams where, like a boutique consultancy of, say, 3 all the way up to 100 or 150, they would augment the Splunk staff as professional services and they would go out there. And it's not just Splunk who do this. Obviously, all the big vendors do this because it's a far easier way than them hiring all the people themselves. So the boutique consultancies, they don't do all the delivery themselves. They would often get something from the bigger partner, like Splunk would hand down some sales contracts from their team and say, we just need 3 guys for this project. Do you have them? Yes or no? And then they're either going to use their own permanent staff that they've got, or sometimes they use contractors. And another reason why this is super lucrative for the boutique consultancy themselves is because having a contractor do the project is a lot cheaper than having permanent staff. So they don't have the risk of needing to feed someone while they're on the bench because you're just paying someone to sit on the bench and do nothing. So that's one great reason to actually use contractors from a boutique consultancy perspective. But the other one is that they're also actually a lot cheaper because if you think about it, permanently employed staff, they have a permanent salary. They need sick pay, they need healthcare, they need days off, they have dogs that get sick and they can't go to work, and all of this stuff adds up. And then as an employer, you're also paying employment tax, national insurance, if you're in the UK, and if you're in the US, it's called something else. The point being is that you have a lot of taxes to pay for permanent employees. So it costs a lot, especially when you get into the 120, 150K realm of salaries. So again, for boutique consultancies, it's a no-brainer to bring in contractors because they save a lot of money on tax and they don't have to pay them if they're not working. So when these firms have deals, you essentially have a deal because you've now partnered with them. And again, like I said before, this works in any vertical. So whether you're working in cloud, DevOps, cybersecurity, AI, whatever, all of these boutique consultancies exist, which means they all need people, which means you should be reaching out to them second. And again, these people are everywhere. I met my first boutique consultancy by actually speaking to someone randomly on site, seeing what they were doing, starting a conversation with them. We got talking. He found out who I am, what we do. We spoke for a while, and then he introduced me to the company that he actually worked as a permie for. We were just on the same contract at the same time. But the point being is that that conversation ended up making me over $1 million, and I'm still partnered with them to this day because they're awesome, and we just keep referring each other for everything that we need. So you can see it's something that really builds a long-term relationship that goes over and over and over, which is how you avoid the job boards and finding scraps and things like that, because you have these people who are looking out for you just as much as you're looking out for them. You're no longer alone. So there are tons of benefits beyond finding contracts when you go down this route. So you might be asking yourself, how do you actually find boutique consultancies? If you're starting out or you don't know many of them, obviously you can use Perplexity and things like that. But one of the best things that you can do is you can use clutch.co. So you filter by the niche, the region, and the tech stack. And when you go through that website, you can actually find consultancies within your range. You can also look in vendor partner directories. So you search for the vendor name and then the partner directory. You can look on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can just type in the little search box, whatever it is, consulting partner or the name of the tech and a systems integrator and any of the other words that they have, or you can just Google it the old fashioned way, or you can use Perplexity and that'll find a whole bunch of things for you as well, probably pulled from Clutch. So if I'm looking for a qualification network of what to actually look for in a boutique consultancy, it would be these criteria. So do they have 10 to 50 employees? And I think that that's the sweet spot for needing contractors. It's not to say that people up to like 150 or even 200, maybe more, don't need contractors. But when it's really small, you have several advantages apart from the fact that they might be trying to grow their company without taking on more risk. But when you have a smaller company, it means that you really get embedded in the team as if you are working there permanently. You might get access to their internal systems, their chats, and have a whole support network with them. But then you also have the benefit of showing off your skills and really getting known within the company. Because the bigger the company, the more things you're going to have to do to actually get noticed. But the smaller the company, they're going to see your things a lot faster than if you were in a much larger company. So I'd also look at any recent case studies or wins that they've posted. Now, I didn't originally do this when I was looking for boutique consultancies because I didn't care. I just wanted to get paid. So you want to vet these people just as much as they're going to vet you. You want to check if they've got any case studies or if they've won any clients recently. And you do this because you don't necessarily want to go and work for someone who is completely brand new as a contractor if they have no history of doing anything at all in the business. That's probably just going to be a waste of your time if they do this whole, we've got pipeline coming up and we want to make sure that you're available. Okay, cool. Tell me more about this pipeline. But, I'm not going to stick around unless you're either going to pay me a retainer to stick around for you. But otherwise, it's kind of first come, first serve thing. Because a lot of companies actually do that. They'll kind of lead you on to keep you in their pipeline if they're going through a sales pipeline, which can take like 3 or 4 months. So that's something you need to keep in mind, that they're not just trying to screw you around. You want to check if they're active on LinkedIn with any real engagement. Some people don't do that, so it's not a complete red flag if they don't have it. But ideally, if they are trying to progress and build their company and grow and they're as awesome as they say they are, they're going to have social presence because that's where everything is going nowadays. And you want to make sure that they have clear service offerings that actually match your skills. If you're speaking to these people and they're saying we do a little bit of this, and there are only like 5 people on the team, that's a red flag because it means that they're scattered. And that means that the chances of them actually finding these things are going to be quite low. So you want to make sure at least 3 or 4 of these things are a yes. And obviously there are other things you want to look for, your values align and things like that. But those are all basic. So why don't we look at a practical example of Clutch just to see how I'd go about finding all of these different people. So here we are at Clutch. You can see it's a super simple website. They pretty much cater for all kinds of niches and they tell you about all different companies within there. So if we just come and have a look, let's just type in here. Actually, we've got IT services and let's just say we're going for AWS. Now, before I do this, actually, I will cover. So staff augmentation can be pretty valuable because essentially that's what you would be doing. By white labeling, you're essentially putting yourself under the name of the company. For instance, if you're working for my company, Atomic Ops, I would bring you on as a contractor and you would essentially be working for me and I would resell you to the end client. And that's how a lot of these partner vendors work. For instance, if I go and work at an end site doing Splunk work, I essentially represent Splunk Professional Services despite the fact that there are 2 layers before even Splunk. It's just something to keep in mind, and that's called staff augmentation. It's one of the methodologies of staff augmentation. Me selling one of my consultants to an end client is me augmenting their staff as well. So you can see it's all layers on layers. But the point being, this could be a lucrative place to look, but then also cybersecurity, whatever it is that you're trying to do. For this one, we're just going to stick with AWS partners. So the cool thing here is that you can then come over here and you can type in a whole bunch of things that you would be looking for. So ideally by now, you know what your day rate is, which means that the hourly rate that they charge needs to be higher than that so that they can make your margin and that they can resell you. But I think at this point, filtering on something like this might be a little bit too premature because again, you're going to be having a conversation where you would ideally find out if their margins worked for you in a direct conversation rather than basing it off of this. But it does give you an idea of what they are charging to an end client because this is generally where people would come to find a company to do work for them. The thing that is important is the agency size. And if we come down here, I would always start with the smaller. So I might go 2 to 9 or 10 to 49 just to start out because these people have really great teams. And I love working with small teams. I've always worked with small teams from a consulting perspective and then ended up on enterprise clients and things like that. I prefer to do it that way because working with smaller teams is much easier. And being an outsider in an enterprise is way easier as well because you don't get sucked into all the internal politics. So if we come down here, we've now filtered to companies with 2 to 9 or 10 to 49. You can see here's a whole list. Obviously, you would want to put your area in, and I think you can choose whether they are remote only or whether they need you on site and things like that. But then you can come and look at their website and you can view their profile. You can see their focus areas and the services that they provide. You would obviously want to make sure that these things align with you. You can see where they're based. So I haven't put in a filter of my location, but ideally you'd want to do that. And we can look at their profile and it will give you a bit more information. So their focus, the industries that they work in, things like that. So it really helps you make a decision if you want to work with these people. And then obviously I would chuck their company name to Perplexity and get it to search Glassdoor, Trustpilot, all of that kind of thing to see if I can find any problems with them. So there are tons of ways you can reach out to these people. Obviously, you can just be direct. You can go on LinkedIn or email. I would probably go LinkedIn because at least my face is there and they can see my profile immediately. And I would just lead in with any information that I could find. I would research them, understand what they're doing, and see if anyone in the company has actually posted about anything. So let's just say Adverscale, I would go onto LinkedIn, I would search Adverscale, I'd find out who the CTO is, who the founders are, who any of the seniors are, and I would DM one or two of them on LinkedIn, maybe talking about a recent post that they've made on LinkedIn, or if they posted a public blog, I would try and find something in that. If they have any issues on Trustpilot or Google reviews, which brings down the quality of their business, I would say I noticed here and saw that you had problems with delivery over here, or you had problems with support tickets over here. I can help you fix this by doing XYZ. Do you need additional support on your team? Tons of different ways to play this. The point being is that research for you starts here, and then you need to really research the company so that you can help use that information to get you wherever it is that you want to go. You need to remember that you're not just going to go in there and ask these people for a bunch of money. You're also not asking them for a job, which is why this is a lot easier to do, because you're not saying, hey, I'm going to be your permanent member of staff. Please pay me this money and I'll become a tax liability for you when I'm on the bench. That's not what you're doing at all. You're actually coming to these people and just adding additional support whenever they need it. So they have absolutely no risk to bring you on board if you can technically do the job, obviously, but they would interview just like a permanent employee. Point being is that this is lucrative for both of you. So when you're approaching them, don't do it from the perspective of being a permanent employee. You do it from the perspective of being a business offering a partnership of services. And that's a position of power as opposed to someone looking for a job, which is a little bit more nuanced and complicated. So when I'm approaching these people, again, it's a super easy template because it's that service-based transaction. Hey, I saw your work with Vendor Tool. I'm an independent consultant with experience in whatever it is that you do. If you ever need extra delivery capacity, happy to send over my credentials. You can do that on LinkedIn. Super straightforward. Send that as a connection request. And hardly anyone is going to turn you down because they're going to want to find out who you are and how you can help their business do this thing, because an extra set of hands is really valuable. And again, if you can find a pain point that they might have and chuck it into this connection request, even better. Then when it comes down to rates, you need to understand that obviously they have defined bands of margins that they work within. So generally it's going to be between 20 and 50%. Now, if you're making 50% margin, that's incredible. It's very rare, can happen. So you would need to fit somewhere in their margin. For instance, if they are selling you to an end client for, let's just say $2,000, they would need to make at least 20% of that to make it lucrative to bring you on board. So if your day rate is something like $1,800 a day, it's probably not going to be lucrative on a $2,000 deal. So you need to keep that in mind. But saying that, it generally does work very often because the rate that they would sell you for is often higher than the rate you would get as an independent consultant. Because when a business sells you, they're selling you with the promise of, if our consultant can no longer work, we have another one to replace him immediately, which means that you have no gap in your work. So that's how you're able to charge a premium, because it's a managed service as opposed to an independent contractor, which is how they can get their margins. You can get your margins and everyone wins in this situation. Another thing to keep in mind is that depending on where you are in the world, it might be easier for these boutique consultancies to hit their margins, in which case you're even more valuable to them. So you need to keep that in mind. If you're working in South Africa and this company is in New York City, it's far easier for them to make a margin of $2,000 on a salary that they would pay someone in South Africa, where you would still hit your margin quite easily. So people who are in these foreign countries, you're far more valuable to these boutique consultancies than the people in the local domain, simply because remote work is literally everywhere. So you need to keep that in mind. Again, you're in a position of power when you're reaching out to these people. So if they said they only pay $700 a day for your role, you should never walk. It's not instantly, this is over with. Ask what they charge to the client. So if they're billing $1,200 a day, there's always room to negotiate. Now, it depends how you do that to them. If you literally say to them, well, what are you selling me for, to the end client? Some of them might get their back up, especially if it's the first time that you're speaking to these people. But there's always room to negotiate, so you need to keep that in mind. And if you want to find out how to negotiate these things, you can check out the video on the screen now. So if they say they only pay you $700 a day, but you somehow know that they're selling you for $1,200 to the end client, you can factor in the margin that they're making. And if it's higher than 20%, cool. But if it goes into the regions of like 30 or 40, that's when you can really start to negotiate. You need to obviously do this with a sense of intelligence and elegance. You can't just go in there and say, hey, I know you're selling me for $1,500. I want more money. That's not how you do it. Obviously, you can use that as a data point. Just make sure that you do it in a more constructive manner, because you don't want to start this relationship off with these people on a negative foot. So then we move on to timing. So there are certain times where you might want to approach these people. Obviously, you can do it any time of the year, but there are certain times when it's bad to do it simply because there are less projects floating around and things like that. So the best month is January, New Year budgets, obviously depending on the regions, but for the most part, New Year, New You, and people are planning where they're going to go. They're planning how much money they're going to spend on new hires, any upcoming projects and things like that. April is also an amazing month because Q2 projects always start. So it's been the end of the first quarter and people are starting to get things rolling. And that's again where they're starting to look for new hires and where the business is going and has money been coming in so far in the first part of the year, things like that. October is also good because it's year-end spending. So people have money that they need to spend to justify the same budget for next year. But they might have realized that they have a whole bunch of problems from the beginning of the year and they're about to miss a deadline because of something. So October is a really good year. You want to avoid July and August because everyone is on holiday, especially if you're in the places where it's really hot at that time of the year. Everyone goes away. So decisions are really delayed during that time. Even if you're on site, a whole bunch of stuff goes wrong and there's no one around to actually talk to about it. Happened tons of times. And then December is budget freeze and change freeze. So if you're working for large enterprises and things like that, you'll notice that they usually cut off around about the 10th or the 11th of December, and they won't let you make any more changes. So Git closes down completely. No compliance risks, anything like that go through. And they also stop any hiring and things like that because everyone's away on Christmas and they just don't get anything done. So the smart thing is to just pause everything. Then we get on to point 3, which is warm recruiter relationships. Now, I'm not telling you to mass blast recruiters. I'm talking about specific ones within your niche. And a side note on this, I know a lot of recruiters get a bad name, especially in my neck of the woods, because they do the hiring equivalent of dining and ditching, where they might just ghost you halfway through a project or something like that. And a lot of people really have sour relationships with them. But the thing you need to remember is that equally, where some of them might be shit, a lot of techies are also shit, or they're robots, or they screw things up with the client, so nobody makes any money. They lie, they cheat, they steal, whatever. People are people, and in any niche that you're in or any industry, this kind of thing can happen. So to automatically say, I'm not going to work with recruiters is ridiculous. And I've actually got a few people who say that they will never work with them for those reasons. But my experience with them has always been completely different because I'm upfront and I tell them exactly what I need. And, if they want to ghost me, that's their problem. But the ones who I've worked with, they haven't ghosted me because we have this professional working relationship where we know it's mutually beneficial. So how this actually works, you find recruiters at niche agencies because they're always looking for contract consultants. You need to understand that this is a two-way relationship. Just as much as you might need a contract, they need people to fill their contracts to make their money. So if you positioned yourself well, you know how to solve the exact problem that they need in whatever domain, they're going to put you forward the second that something drops. Again, because they're incentivized to do it. It's their job. So you get the work and they get their cut from the client. Everybody wins. There are some caveats on that we'll get into in a little bit, but for the most part, everybody wins. So how do we find the right recruiters? You definitely don't need to pay for any of this kind of service. I wouldn't actually pay a recruiter with my own money to go and find me a job. That would be ridiculous. You just need to go and look on LinkedIn for these people. So you need to know what to search, what keywords recruiters actually use, and you know how to spot the ones that are worth your time. But apart from doing those things, you also need to make sure that your profile is exactly what this recruiter might be looking for. So when I first started consulting, my LinkedIn was pretty abysmal. In fact, it hardly had anything. I was consulting permanently for a company when I first started. And I think the only thing on my profile was that I was working for this company. I think I had cybersecurity engineer at the time. And as soon as I got my first placement on site and I was doing Splunk work then, I decided one day when I was bored on site, okay, I'm going to update my LinkedIn profile and just say senior Splunk consultant. Put in a bunch of stuff and skills and fields on my profile. And within a week, I had recruiters reaching out to me because at the time, Splunk was in extremely high demand. So I spoke to my mentor and I'm like, holy shit, did you see how many recruiters have spoken to me? And he's like, yeah, this happens to me all the time. Have you only just done your LinkedIn now? And it got to a point where I was getting like 5, 6, or even 8 a week recruiters reaching out to me with contracts for that. And all I did was make sure that my LinkedIn was up to date. So it's super important, and we'll go through that quickly. So how to find niche recruiters without using Sales Navigator, because again, you don't need to pay for Sales Navigator. So you just go to the LinkedIn search, you look for whatever it is that you're doing, your tool, your niche, and you look for a recruiter specifically around that. So it could be Splunk Talent Acquisition, Splunk Resourcing, Splunk Hiring Manager, whatever, Palo Alto, whatever it is that you're doing. And they all have different names. Some of them are recruiters, talent acquisition, delivery consultant, staffing partner, contract resourcing, hiring manager, the list goes on. You can ask AI for a list of names that they might use, but those are the most ones. Then you click the people tab to filter out any companies and posts. Use the locations filter to narrow down the country or city if that's what you want to do. And then you check their heading and their about section. Now, we'll dive into this soon on LinkedIn, but what you really want to do when you're looking at recruiters to not waste anyone's time is actually look at the firm that they're working for. So look at their Google reviews, their Glassdoor, their Trustpilot, and see if they actually have a reputable name behind them. Because if they obviously have shit stars on all three of those fronts, you don't want to work with them yourself, because then you're just wasting your time. They're probably the ghosting type. But if it's a reputable place, I think one of them in the UK was LaFosse. They're pretty amazing, especially in cybersecurity at the time I was working in. Their guys were super professional. So, if you're there, you can check them out. I'm not affiliated with them. I just know that they're really good. So that's what I would do first when I'm checking out these people. I'm always going to do my research, whether I'm looking for a job or whether I'm looking for actual people to make friends with or build partnerships with, things like that. Always do your research. And you need to know what keywords recruiters are going to use. So when we get to the LinkedIn thing, obviously your tech is going to be the first thing that they search, but you want to find all the other keywords that they're going to be looking for on your profile. So what do they look for in job titles? Some of them would be like senior Splunk consultant or things like that, because they search via seniority depending on the contract that they have. So you can get a list of keywords, just use Perplexity or ChatGPT, whatever, ask it to do some deep research and find out what keywords recruiters would be using for whatever it is that you're doing. So if we come into LinkedIn quickly, let me just go to my profile, and we can see here, so right now everything of mine is tailored around AI because that's what I'm doing. But the point being, when I was a Splunk consultant, literally everything everywhere was Splunk consultant. So right now, even if you've got this outcome-based title in your headline, which you should have, turning AI chaos into competitive advantage for mid-market companies at Atomic Ops. That's cool. If you're a senior Splunk consultant, I would definitely make sure that I would put it in after the pipe. So you have your value-based thing in the beginning, but then you make sure that you list your actual job title, because this helps recruiters find you. So if you were in Splunk or senior cybersecurity, whatever, you would have that over here just so that it helps them find you within the keywords. But then literally everywhere that you can, you need to have in your skills and your keywords, because they're going to be searching for you via your skills and your keywords. And whoever profile matches them the most, the more likely they are to reach out to you. So put whatever you can in your about page. This isn't a personal brand overview, but you can see I've got my top skills listed here for whatever it is that I'm doing at the time. It's always going to change. This thing lives and breathes along with you. Any of your featured stuff should align with that as well. Any of your posts, that definitely helps attract recruiters to you and businesses to you. So make sure that you're posting if you can. And your experience, all of the experience that you've done should be tailored around that. If you have any projects or websites, you can list them here as well. And if we come further down, the most important is obviously your certifications. They're going to be looking for that stuff as well. But then your skills, so list every single skill that you have. Try getting endorsements from people if you can who endorse the skills that you say you have. It's all super important. And these are the kind of things that pop up when recruiters search for specific people within their industry. But if we want to find recruiters, let's just say, I'm just going to use Splunk as an example. So Splunk Talent Acquisition. You can see here, I would always filter by first and second. I'd start with first because these are obviously people in my warm network. And as we spoke about in this beginning of this video, your warm network are the people that you want to reach out to first. And then obviously I would include second. So once I've gone through all of my first connections, saying the same template that we used earlier, and I'm now at the recruiter stage, I might find all of these people in talent acquisition. And I'd reach out to them in a similar manner, saying, this is what I am. Perhaps in the future, when you have a contract for Splunk, these are my credentials. Let me know. I'll be available. It's as easy as that. Obviously, make it human, get to know them, things like that. But after first, you can obviously go down to second. And again, second degree means that you still have someone in common, which means that you have something in common, which means there is kind of a level of trust, even though you're still a stranger to this person. So what you could do is you could go to this person, Andrew, and you could say, hey, Andrew, I saw that you have Chelsea. Wow, that's a weird way to spell Chelsea. In common, can you introduce us? That type of thing. Obviously, you need to use the same methodology that we used for when we were reaching out to warm leads earlier. You don't just want to message this person if you haven't spoken to them in years and asking them for a favor. That would be weird. Point being, break the ice of this person and see if they can introduce you to that person. Or you can just reach out to this person directly and say, hey, I noticed that we have this person in common. I'm looking for XYZ. I thought I might be helpful to you. If you're looking to place people on any contracts, this is my profile. It's as simple as that. And obviously you can do third, but it's a lot harder than doing first and second. First. So another thing that you want to do is you want to come here to all filters, because this is where you obviously find your location. You find out the company that they're currently working in. Now, I wouldn't need to find someone who works exactly at Splunk, because remember, we're also targeting boutique consultancies. So I guess Cisco owns Splunk now, so you could also do that. But the point being is that I might actually come down here and find company size, and I would choose a smaller company because then I know that it's a boutique consultancy. And then once I've done that, then I can reach out to the talent acquisition at the boutique consultancy as opposed to the large corporate recruiters and things like that. But there are tons of ways to do this. And again, it depends on exactly what you want to do. The point being is that you can filter everything here. So you can see it's really straightforward. I suppose the hardest part about them is just sparking a relationship. You need to know how to speak to people. But that's why I've given you a pretty easy template that you can use with them when you reach out to them. So once you find them, again, I'm not just going to go and speak to everyone. I first want to research their company, like I already spoke about. Trustpilot, Google, Glassdoor. It helps you understand their culture, and that's super important because these are the people who you're going to be working with. And while you don't need to have 100% alignment in values because they're not going to be your life partner, you want to make sure that they do have some values that align with yours, because that will help you find someone who will actually have a lifelong relationship within the career that you're doing. So you need to make sure that you understand that you're building a mutually beneficial relationship. You're not applying for a job. The recruiter needs you just as much as you need them. They can't place a role unless they have the right delivery person who can actually do the thing that they need to do. And that person is you in this case. So treat the outreach like a conversation between two professionals solving the same problem from different angles, not like you're begging for work. And you just DM them like a human, exactly like we've spoken about in this entire video. Yes, you want to be clear about what you do, but it's not HR. You can be more personable, even a little cheeky, and definitely human. So again, they're now pretty much your peers at this point. In the worst case, they work for you because you're helping them make money just as much as you help them. So keep that in mind. A short direct offer of help, a bit of personality or casual opener. Again, look at the person. If they're like 70 years old and they wear a corporate suit, you probably can't go in there with a cool icebreaker that would work on someone in their 20s. They're probably a lot more formal, maybe a bit old school, things like that. So you're going to take different approaches for different people. For me, I always try and inject personality into everything that I'm doing, simply because it makes you memorable. So you've got to keep that in mind. But you need to frame that you're here to support them. It's not a pitch to them. You're here to help them. And ultimately that signals that they're going to help you. So your template options are, you can be clean and direct. Hey, I'm an independent consultant in whatever niche, looking for new contracts. If anything relevant hits your desk, happy to share my credentials. Either way, I'd love to connect. You can do a warmer icebreak style. Saw you posted whatever tool or role on LinkedIn or Twitter, wherever it is that they are. Reminded me about a rollout I did last quarter where the whole thing nearly exploded on day one. If you have a funny story, that type of thing, find something relatable to whatever it is that they posted about or spoke about in a blog, things like that. It's got to be something public though. Don't do something weird and personal from an old post of theirs. So the mindsets that you need to remember are that this isn't a one-way ask. It's a dual partnership. Just like everything else that we've done here, if you approach a boutique consultancy, it's the exact same mindset. You're both helping one another. They might need some augmented staff in the future at zero risk, and you need a contract at some point to make money to feed yourself. So it's win-win. You're giving them something that they can sell confidently. You're helping them look good to their client, and the better your delivery, the more that they want to send you to more clients later on. So you really need to make sure that your image is represented very well when you're going into this thing, but also that you do an amazing job on site, because obviously the recruiter will check in with the client that they put you on site, and they'll find out if you were actually any good, and this client will give feedback. So always make sure that you're shining when you're on site, because it's not just your name anymore, it's your business's name, and it's the recruiter's name as well, and both of these things help feed you. So do your research, know who they place, how they talk, what their goals are, things like that, but don't over-formalize it. You're a consultant, not a candidate. Those are two very different things. One is a service, and one is a person looking for a job. Two very different positions. Build the connection like you're trying to join their crew, as opposed to being a candidate that's going to work permanently for them. Again, you want to make sure that you keep your LinkedIn profile cleaned and exactly aligned to whatever it is that they want to do. Senior security architect, I help whatever type of business get result by doing the thing that you do, resulting in the outcome. That tells them everything that they need to know. And then, as we spoke about and went through in the LinkedIn profile, it's super simple to add your skills. If you can't think of any, again, use Perplexity, ChatGPT to align whatever the role is that you're trying to do with any keywords that recruiters would use and any skills that you should add to your profile to add weight to recruiters and third parties finding you. And the ultimate goal of all of this is to build 1 to 2 recruiters who keep coming back over and over again. I've had one that I used for a while, but ultimately I've reverted to using partners and boutique consultancies because that's just the nature of what I did. But having strategic recruiter relationships is incredible because even if you don't have work, if someone comes to you and you know someone who needs a job, you can refer them to them. And again, that helps both your friend and it helps the recruiter. So if you give them tips like that, they're going to keep coming back to you because, again, you're giving them stuff. And the amount of appreciation a lot of recruiters have when you do something like that is pretty amazing. So you need to keep that in mind when you're in this business, is that the more people you help, the more these people are going to help you, because it's a very small loop. Even though it's massive global businesses that you might work for, the people who are actually doing the work, we're pretty finite, and you're always going to see people that you've met before. There is also something important that you need to note about recruiter margins. So this isn't all of them, but some of them, they make more money by selling you for a lower day rate. So you really need to do your homework when you're speaking to these people, understand what your value is, what you're worth to the end client and things like that. Because there are recruiters who might say $550 a day for someone with 8 years experience. And obviously that's a joke, and anyone experienced is going to know that that's a joke. But if you're starting out and you've only got like 3 years experience and someone comes to you and says, oh, here's a contract for $375 and you haven't done any of your homework, you don't really know what you're worth, you might end up taking it because A, you need money, but B, you also think, oh, I guess that's the going rate. So again, it's your own fault for not doing the research. But just keep in mind that these people aren't always going to argue in your favor to the end client. If you say, I want $800, they might not always go and fight in your corner because they are the ones who will be making more margin for placing you at a lower day rate. So you need to keep that in mind. Not all of them, but some of them. And the way to find that out is obviously to do your research on the business and the recruiter. You could ask friends about how this works, but honestly, I would just use Perplexity. I would put in the name of the business that this person worked for, and I would get it to find out their operating model, how much they charge, things like that. If that didn't work, as a worst case scenario, what you could do is you could phone them, pretend that you're a client, and say that you're looking for XYZ, and then find out their entire operating model, how much they charge, and things like that. A little bit of espionage, it can work. It's a bit critical. I don't think I would ever bother doing that much effort. But, you know, if you're starting out and you had no warm list, you had no other route but this possible route, and you wanted to make sure that you were getting the best possible rate, you could do that kind of thing as well. Then there are also some red flags that you want to avoid. So if a boutique consultancy asks you for some free test work, you want to be very careful with that. I'm not talking about like a quick project where they ask you to do like a few hours of a test just to pass a technical test for part of the interview process. That's kind of normal depending on whatever it is that you're trying to do. Most of the time, it will just be a technical interview and they'll ask you a few questions around your thought patterns. They might ask you to solve a specific problem that you go off screen for an hour or two, maybe even in front of them. But the point being, that's not free test work. That's just passing an interview. Free test work is if they say, okay, cool, you know, we just want to make sure that you're a fit for the project that we're currently working on. We have this problem. Take about 2 days for you to solve. Can you do this? Can you build us this dashboard? Whatever. That's a bit too far, depending on how much time and effort it takes, because that's more for like free work, but it's very rare. Recruiters who can't explain the project. So if they don't know much about the project that you're working on, that's a massive red flag, because it means that they don't understand their client or they don't understand the tech, in which case they probably aren't going to get you the best rate. But it also shows that they have no interest in whatever they're doing and they're just literally trying to farm people to put them from A to B, which again forms part of the bad recruiter name brand. But you obviously don't want to work with those people. You want to make sure that they can tell you everything about the project, the client, the length, the day rate, all of that kind of stuff. Projects under 2 weeks, so they're usually not going to be worth your admin. This is coming from experience. The projects where I've worked 2 weeks, they have all been terrible. One, from a stress point of view, because the client obviously thinks that because you're a consultant, you know everything, point one. But point two, they expect things on these short-term contracts because they want to get the most out of their money within that time. So their deadlines are massively squashed. Sometimes it's their own fault, but sometimes they just have no understanding of how long things actually take. And the person who scoped the project might not understand the project either, in which case they're like, yeah, we can easily do a cloud migration in 2 weeks. You want to make sure you avoid things like that. Always understand the scope of work before you accept anything. And keep in mind that projects under 2 weeks are far more stressful than they are worth for you. If you have no money and you really need something, screw it, take it on. Those are the only times I did it. But otherwise, most of the time, all of my contracts have been 6 months minimum, and then they've just rolled for years and years and years. I've worked for some of the same clients for like 4 years, which is really great when you're a consultant. But even from the perspective of me running my own business now, where I'm selling other consultants, I'm not going to sell them on a project less than 3 months. It's far too much admin, especially when you're selling at enterprise level, because those guys take ages just to onboard people. So if your first month is literally onboarding, waiting for someone to sign you in, you only have 2 months to actually deliver the work. And that can actually reflect negatively on you as a business, because they say, well, what have you been doing? And sometimes even if you show these people that it was them who was the roadblocker the entire way in front of a project manager, you still end up getting the bad name. So 6 months is our regular thing when I'm selling people, but I will never do less than 3 months. And then finally, we want to line you up in case it goes ahead. You always want to ask if this is funded. So are they going to retain you to keep you around? I wouldn't hang around for anyone that wasn't going to pay me to hang around. You just need to keep that in mind. But some people will ask. And there are obviously lots of other red flags when it comes to this type of thing. I will cover them on individual videos for each one of the different types of outreach that we would be doing. So stick around for that one. But you need to remember this one thing, because it's super important. When you're reaching out to these people, everybody thinks, oh my God, I need to have a big network, or I need to speak to all of these people just to get something. And you don't. You need one high trust partner who comes back to you every single time you need a contract. And like I said, that's happened to me over and over again. I don't rely on these things. I have multiple things that I rely on. So if one fails, I have the other two. Keep that in mind. You want to build these 3 things while you're going through your entire career, because it's far less effort for you than actually having to do the whole cold DM thing. On the screen right now is a video of how I found my first client in consulting without any LinkedIn presence. This video will really help you deep dive into all of the things that we've just spoken about. Otherwise, please leave some comments below of any content you'd like me to cover in future episodes, and I'll see you guys in the next one.